So I wanted to talk, I'll just start off talking a little bit about OCASI, the organization that I am with. OCASI champions equity and human rights for immigrants and refugees through advocacy, collective action, collaborative planning, research, capacity building, and information and knowledge transfer. So an event like this is just right up our alley. So I'm going to talk a little bit differently. I'm not going to talk specifically about anything that we've done at OCASI. OCASI is an umbrella organization. We don't provide direct services. We like to think that we help the sector to do better work and to impact everyone in a positive way. So I just wanted to walk us through a little bit of digital history because I think this is really important to put what we're going through now into perspective. So in 1975, PCs entered the workplace, and all they did was word processing or database management. Then around 1980, we had a server with remote terminals, and they could run one application at a time remotely. And then in the mid 80s, personal computers revolution came about, and we started to see personal computers in the home and in the workplace in a much more robust way. So what happened is that this created a boom and a demand for new jobs in the workforce. Suddenly now we needed computer technicians, application specialists, network technicians, microcomputer support techs, all sorts of folks that were needed to support this effort. And this didn't happen overnight. It took many years, and for some it was a 15-year journey. 1986 to 1990 roughly was the age of information, where businesses started to collect a lot of data and analyze that data and make business decisions based on that. But the big revolution happened between 1990 and 1998, which is when I entered the workforce and began to support organizations. I worked at a university for 22 years, and then I moved into a nonprofit organization. And so there's some relevance there to what we're going through. So I was tasked with training a team of employees at our university on how to use the Windows operating system. These are people that had never typed, rarely typed, had certainly never pushed a button to turn on a computer. And there were a lot of lunch and learns, let me just say. We did an awful lot of that work. And the most effective way that I was able to get people to understand and to learn and to embrace the training was to earn their trust. And on an interpersonal level, that's so important. They have to be able to trust you as not only a trainer, but as somebody that's going to support them after that training. Now, this is back in the day when we didn't have online training, so it was all in person. And what was the most effective, we found, was if we had someone embedded with that team to be able to provide support whenever they needed it. And that will be something that I talk about throughout my presentation. So it's also, if we're only focusing training on selected apps instead of holistically addressing the fundamental processes that these applications are helping us to accomplish, that's really limiting and not helpful. So it needs to be a holistic training that isn't just about a specific activity or application, but it's what are we trying to accomplish and what's the best tool that we can use. Around the end of the 20th century, OCASI helped to digitize the sector by providing opportunities for PCs and networking to happen in many agencies throughout Ontario. And that, I am sure, I wasn't here at that time, I'm sure that was as disruptive as we might imagine it to be. And then we had, from 2007 to 2010, the smartphone and the tablet were introduced. And then suddenly, I'm sorry, I skipped over 1998 when the internet became mainstream and all those messenger apps started happening. AOL Messenger, Yahoo Messenger, Microsoft Messenger. So all of those apps started to happen, right? And then when we started to have these different form factors of devices we were using, then the internet had to respond to that with responsive web design and things like that. So I present this to just give you a snapshot of what's happened with technology over the last many years. And we have to acknowledge that that's a lot of change. And how organizations are able to manage the change will be the key to success or failure for training programs. So human factors in managing change are so important. And I'm talking down at the interpersonal level between everyone that we work with. So change management must take into account the human aspect, where emotions and how they are handled play a significant role in implementing change successfully. There is a lot of fear when we do massive change. There's a lot of concern around the ego, and maybe that we start to see barriers that get put up by folks because they're afraid to let you know how little they might know. And so it's making sure that there's a trust between the trainer and the receiver of the training that's so important. Equally, and probably more important than that, is the tone at the top. Leadership at both senior and middle management levels can either make or break a change project. So it's critical that they embrace and support those changes. And as leaders, their attitude toward the project will be observed by their teams. And if they don't see their leaders making the changes that they're forced to make, that we're not going to have a successful experience in that change. So there are 4 conditions for changing mindsets. And the first one is a purpose to believe in. Luckily, I believe that we have people that have chosen to work in this sector because they believe in it, and they believe in welcoming people to Canada, and bringing people in and providing them the supports that they need. So anyone leading a major change program must take the time to think through its story, like what makes all of this worth undertaking, and to explain that story to all of the people involved in making the change happen so that their contributions make sense to them as well. The next would be reinforcement systems. So when an organization's goals for new behavior are not reinforced, employees are less likely to adopt it consistently. If managers are urged to spend more time coaching their staff, but coaching doesn't figure into their performance scorecards, they're probably not likely to bother with that, right? So we must have complete support from the bottom to the top of all of the organizations that are undertaking this change. The skills required for change are needed, and that's what we're really talking about. Adults can't learn merely by listening to instructions. They must also absorb it, use it experimentally, integrate it within their existing knowledge. In practice, this means that you can't teach everything there is to know about a subject in just one session. It's not a one and done. It's not even a couple and done. It's much better to break down the formal teaching into chunks with time in between for the learners to reflect, experiment, and apply the new principles. Large-scale change happens only in steps, and it's around how we learn and acquire that knowledge and begin to use it that it really makes the impact. And lastly, consistent role models. So it's the behavior in organizations. It's deeply affected not only by role models, but also by the groups with which people identify. So role modeling individuals must therefore be confirmed by the groups that surround them if it's to have a permanent or deep influence. We don't have to look any further than our children and the peer pressure that they're faced with in school. So around this, knowledge, tools, processes, and supports. So knowledge must be gained and given frequently and freely. Tools should be standardized with options. Processes must continually be refined, and change without appropriate supports that can be trusted will likely fail. And speaking of failure, 70% of change programs fail. So it's just good to have that in front of us so that we understand that we're not going to just try this once or twice or 3 times. We're going to keep at it until we succeed, and we must do that. It's not a one and done proposition. This is a career-long endeavor. One thing I want to instill is that, well, people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. I really like that quote. And this goes to something that I was taught at a nonprofit that I worked for, and that's around heart-centered leadership and heart-centering your work with your heart. And we must care about the individuals. We must provide support in a caring and supportive way. And this is going to take time. And I would say that as much as we're training people on how to use technology, we must train the managers on how to live and manage in this new world, in the new way that we're going to do this work. Join me over at settlenet.org. It's a community of practice website that allows us to have really great discussions. Love to see you over there. I'm sure that we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. And my contact information is here. Thank you so much.